Finding answers to the mystery of the unknown. You know, despite their many appearances over the years being some of the oldest Pokemon in the franchise, and in canon, potentially being the oldest Pokemon in existence, there's still a lot left up to the imagination. Who built the Ruins of Alph? What's with the strange radio signal there? And are they the most powerful Pokemon when you put them together? Or are they just alphabet-y spaghetti? I've been studying the lore of Pokemon on YouTube for the last 10 years, and the mysteries of the unknown since I was a little lad. More on this story a little bit later. But in this video, you and I are going to go deep into Pokemon history and see if we can finally come to some conclusions, both the lore and the theories of the unknown. And while you're there, see if you can spot any hidden messages somewhere in this video. So first things first, when it comes to the kind of Pokemon I make videos about, legendary Pokemon, they're powerful or they're rare. The unknown is neither. It's a weak Pokemon on its own, only knowing a single move, Hidden Power, which is not especially strong. It's the Psychic type Pokemon, and Hidden Power can be any type of move. Additionally, they're perfectly common. They appear in swarms, clusters, and families wherever you do find them. So why am I making a video about them? Well, you know, there's just something different about the unknown. It's their presentation in-game and all other media. Take a look at this trailer from the third Pokemon movie.
Strange ancient Pokemon, more legendary than Lugia, more mysterious than Mew. Their strength, unbelievable. Their power, unstoppable. Their identity, unknown.
Oh, that trailer goes hard. It's so early 2000s. So more legendary than Lugia? Really? How's that possible? The unknown are Psychic type Pokemon, and Psychic type in that era at that time was held in high regard only for the most powerful and mysterious Pokemon. Additionally, just look at them. They're giant floating eyeballs, but they represent letters of the alphabet, the Latin alphabet as we know it. But to be clear, in canon, for many of the characters of the Pokemon world, this is some ancient, undecipherable language, hieroglyphs that contain secret messages from a lost civilization that the people of modern day, ruin maniacs and enthusiasts of Pokemon lore, are trying to decipher. We first encounter these at the Ruins of Alph in the Johto region. Of these ruins, modern-day scientists have discovered 4 puzzle shrines and a main hall. Each of the shrines holds a movable painting, a puzzle to various fossil Pokemon, Omanyte, Kabuto, Aerodactyl, and unusually in this group, Ho-Oh being the hardest shrine to access. Solving these puzzles will send the player character down a trapdoor, careening to chambers below containing messages from the unknown. At this point in the main hall, unknown will start to appear amongst the Rhydon statues. At this time, there were 26 different unknown forms that had been documented into the Pokedex, but more recently, additional forms have been found, the question mark and exclamation mark. As well as that, in the third Pokemon movie, there are even more forms reported. And all these forms assemble to create messages scrawled across the walls of the ruins. We learned from a ruin maniac in the Sevi Island that this writing system is at least 1,500 years old. The unknown appearing in stone carvings isn't unusual either. In the third Pokemon movie, there are stone tablets that for uncertain reasons can summon or produce the unknown that seem to live within them. The unknown, according to the Pokedex, their shapes look like hieroglyphs on ancient tablets. Its flat, thin body is always stuck to walls, and when alone, nothing happens. However, if there are 2 or more, an odd power is said to emerge. They seem to communicate among each other telepathically. This Gen 2 lore really deepens in the third movie as well, where we see a book of legendary Pokemon featuring the unknown, suggesting their status. In this book, there are all sorts of strange depictions. There is an Entei being ridden on by some heroine, and this is actually something that happens in the movie, suggesting it might be a book of prophecy, perhaps events of the past or the future. Another prophecy that seems to happen is that of the page with the hibiscus flower beach and the sun over top with some kind of deity inside. Could this be a reference to Solgaleo and the Alola region that happens in the future? Then on another page, the one that's relevant to this video, we see the unknown, en masse in some giant form that looks like an atom, being overlooked by an elderly man in robes. Is he overlooking them, viewing them, or controlling them? Perhaps if this is a book of legendary Pokemon, it's not the unknown that are the legendary Pokemon. Perhaps they are when they come together, but maybe it's the man. More on that a little bit later. Now in Pokemon Crystal, the lore expands further both in the international and in the Japanese exclusive version. Starting with the international, we learn from a sage that the Unown has some special connection to the legendary beasts, specifically Suicune, who is the box art legend of the game. In the opening cutscene, we see the Unown running alongside Suicune, and of course in the third Pokemon movie, we see Entei being produced by the imagination of Molly Hale. So perhaps there is some connection to the legendary beasts. Additionally, all of the things the Unown create from Molly's imagination are formed from crystal, and Suicune has on its head a giant crystal. In the Japanese version of the game, though, there's even more. The Japanese Communications Center opens up in Goldenrod City, and a scientist that we find in the Ruins of Alph suggests that more Unown have been appearing in the ruins since the Communications Center opened up. The Communications Center being used in Japan to connect the Game Boy to a mobile adapter so that people could use the internet on their Game Boy. Additionally, there seems to be some connection with the Unown and Goldenrod through the Goldenrod radio tower. See, when you're in the Ruins of Alph, tune in using your Pokegear to a certain frequency, and you'll hear a noise. Strange and unusual. It was a mystery for years, but it seems to be perhaps the Unown chattering to one another telepathically. You tune in to their wavelength. And as many of you will know, the noise that it creates is the sound made by the legendary item of Sinnoh, the Celestica or Azure Flute. This means whoever designed the flute, likely the original Celestica people, knew of the chatter sounds of these creatures. We'll get into Sinnoh shortly, but there are other unknown ruins in the Pokemon world. Waiting on the last of the Sevi Islands just below the Sevol Canyon is the Toby ruins. Not the only ruin across the Isle chain, but it's where a ruin maniac mentions the ruins to be over 1500 years old, which is where we get this date from. The ruins are activated by a small chamber just to the north of the main island, called the Toby Key. You use strength here similar to the Regi chambers of Hoenn, and then they are unlocked. We also do see across the Sevi Island expanse more ruins featuring the Braille writing system connected to the Regis and another ancient civilization. So perhaps these two ancient writing systems that need to be deciphered to solve puzzles are in fact related, but more on that in the theory section. In Sinnoh, or as it was known in the old days, Hisui, there is the Solaceon ruins. They stand likely as the creation point of the ranch town of Solaceon. The only thing this town is really known for is its Pokemon Daycare, where Pokemon eggs can be found, and it's interesting to note that in the Kanto region, the only place you can do that is again on the Sevi Islands, not far from the Unown, and in Johto, it's just below Goldenrod, not far from the Ruins of Alph. This might be important later in the theory section too. And actually, speaking of Pokemon eggs, I did do a video on how Togepi fits into this whole puzzle, but that's like a whole separate topic, so after you're done here, you might well want to watch that to get the full picture. Anyway, most of the Unown can be found in the Solaceon ruins, but a couple of the Unown, the question mark and exclamation mark, can only be found through a ruin maniac who's trying to dig through from Route 114. Here he tries to approach the Solaceon ruins by digging through the cave from the other side. This cave and network of ruins stands directly between Mount Cornet, the creation point perhaps of the entire Pokemon world, and the Sendoff Spring, an ancient spring that leads to the Distortion world. In the time of Hisui, it was part of the province known as the Crimson Mylands, and the Unown explored the region wide, watching people, never attacking them in an unthreatening way. Usually watching people and Pokemon from quite unusual locations, passive observers, and offering messages to the trainer who catches them as to how they can find more of their kind and reunite. They desire to be together. Across the anime, unknown text can frequently be seen in relation to old scripture to do with Dialga and Palkia and the creation mythos. They offer the meaning of life and friendship, and in the anime specifically, the Solaceon ruins are guarding a special key that Team Galactic uses to find the Spear Pillar. And while the Unown don't explicitly appear in Unova or Galar or regions further out, combining Kanto, Johto, and Sinnoh together is the Sinjo ruins that stands in between them all. Built by people sharing cultures from across the regions of Johto and Sinnoh, it's at least a few hundred years old, according to a ruin maniac. If you have an Arceus in your party, you are teleported there, to a shrine that inside holds the mystery stage. Cynthia, champion and lore enthusiast, tells us that the Kimono girls likely built this stage, and that a ceremony here allows Arceus to create new eggs of the creation Pokemon. And Arceus seems to do all of this by channeling and enlisting the help of the unknown to bring its will, or perhaps yours, to life. And the creation gods of Pokemon, well, they definitely have connections to the Unown, for when Dialga and Palkia do battle in the Darkrai movie, their strikes and attacks seem to affect the very fabric of the outer reality, sending Unown flying. What is this outer reality, the alternative dimension? Well, it appears to be, by all of the anime appearances, where the Unown live and reside en masse. They reside both there and in the physical world in carvings. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, Professor Lavington has this to say in the Pokedex. It's hard to believe these strangely shaped Pokemon are truly living creatures. I've pointed out that the species has many forms that resemble writings from other lands, but no one will take me seriously. But I do. Professor Lavington has visited many lands, as indicated by his 3 starter Pokemon, Rowlet, Cyndaquil, and Oshawott. So he's seen the Unown writing out there, likely in Johto. But he might have also seen it if he ever visited the Hoenn region. For Hoenn is part of the same country, the same landmass, according to Professor Oak, that makes up Sinnoh, Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn. And on the Mirage Islands, in the Mirage Cave, Unown can be found. It's the only other place in the main series where Unown are located. Now, I'm sure you're ready to start sliding the puzzle pieces together and seeing what images are produced. Those would be the theories that the community has come up with over the years. And I'll get to that, as well as my lovely story about this bit of fan art that I can't wait to tell you about. But before all of that, there is another puzzle that I think you're going to really enjoy. It's an Unown puzzle that I've created for you, and it comes in 2 parts over on Pokedoku. Pokedoku is a puzzle game that they very kindly reached out to me when I started Lawkeeper Toby and said, hey, we love a good Pokemon mystery. Would you team up with us sometime? And they very kindly promoted me, so I just want to return the favor. And right now, I've got this puzzle set up for you. Pokedoku is set up on a 3x3 grid with prompts on either side of the grid on either axis, and then it's just up to you to find the Pokemon that fits those roles. There'll definitely be a Pokemon for every square, so try and find them and don't get them wrong. In fact, try and find the most unique combinations possible. Or my puzzle for you is to find the Pokemon that I chose, and I've got a clue for you. Most of the Pokemon that I chose to be in my puzzle, they are in this video. If you're seeing this video as it releases, you can go and play it right now, and if you see it within the first 2 weeks, it should appear in the archive section. But it's not just the one puzzle. Like I say, it's a puzzle in 2 parts, and both puzzles complement each other, because the other puzzle, the bonus puzzle of the day, comes with Unown writing as the prompts. So go and test your puzzle solving skills. The link is in the description. Thank you, Pokedoku team, for letting me do this, and let's see how many of you can guess the Pokemon that I chose. So that's the lore, but what about the legends, and what about my personal legend, all to do with that picture? Well, like I say, I've been studying Pokemon lore over the last decade, so let's jump in with the theories and stories that have come up over the years, all about the Unown. So this first theory about the Unown is the most popular, and it's probably the most popular because it's the most likely to be true. Many fans just think of this as unknown fact, and you probably have already put the breadcrumbs together watching this video so far. The Unown as the 1,000 arms of Arceus. In its very first Pokedex entry, we read that it is described in mythology as the Pokemon that shaped the world with its 1,000 arms. Now, of course, Arceus, just by looking at it, does not have 1,000 arms. It maybe has 2 or 4. It's got 4 legs. It doesn't really have any arms. But perhaps we're talking metaphorically here, or as Lockstin put it in his video on the topic, arms as in armaments. 1,000 armaments, extensions of the Unown that do its bidding, that do its will. Captain Fidget points out in his video on the topic that the Unown are kind of like seraphs, angels. They are messengers of God. And sure enough, in the Sinjo Ruin event, we see the Arceus calls upon the Unown and uses their power to create an egg of one of the creation deities. On top of that, the noise that the Azure or Celestica flute makes is that of the cries and chatter of the Unown, or at least we think so. It matches the radio signal that we find in the Ruins of Alph. And then there's the book in the 3rd Pokemon movie. Obviously, this was before Arceus' inception into the franchise, but we see a man taking a classical depiction of a Christian god alongside a number, like a web, or an atom of unknown eyes. Could this have been the idea of a godlike person? And in the world of Pokemon, that would be an artist's interpretation of what God looked like, commanding the Unown, shaping them at the spear pillar, the point of creation to create the world. But it's more than that, though, because the Unown's one move is hidden power. It is the different elements that make up the Pokemon world. Infinity Energy expresses itself through these types, and the Unown can use these types as balls of, well, energy. We know that much of the Pokemon world was created by golems made of crystallized energy. We see that with the Regis, and I'll talk more about that in a Regi video. Regidrago is made of crystallized dragon energy. Is it possible that these titans that helped shape and shift the world were originally the result of large amounts of unknown energy coming together? And the thing that really blew me away about that image in the third movie, every single unknown letter can be seen inside that shape. Every single one. Except G. G for God. Okay, for this one, I need to go into the game and explore the ruins. It just looks so good. Okay, the thing is, this next theory is an expansion of the last one. Yes, Arceus in the Pokemon world is the creation force. And yes, the Unown express its creative will. But this theory takes it a step further and says, what if the world of Pokemon existed in a video game? Just think about it. Obviously, within the canon, the characters of the world of Pokemon believe that they're real. Ash Ketchum in the show believes that he really is Ash Ketchum. As for you, the player in the games, you believe you're real too, adds to all of the gym leaders and the Elite Four. But then, how does that work with characters like the Game Freak employees who live inside the world of Pokemon, yet claim that they have created the game you're in? How does that work for the characters who teach you how to use certain menus and which buttons to press in order to achieve certain effects in the game world? There seems to be some people, some beings that can see outside of the canon of Pokemon from within. The idea here is that the Unown aren't just the will of the god Pokemon Arceus, but they are quite literally the text, the code that makes up the video game story. They represent the script. And it's not just an idea. Remember the Sinjo Ruins event, of course, that shows Arceus summoning the Unown, and then we get these flashes on the Nintendo DS of photos of the real world. Like, if that's the Pokemon world, it's certainly the Pokemon world as we've never seen it. On top of that, when Dialga and Palkia battle on the top of Spear Pillar in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, the battle with Dialga seems to literally glitch out the sky. When people in the world of Pokemon describe the mythology of the Pokemon world, they describe the Sinnoh-myths, a swirling, chaotic void, and then came an egg at the center of it all. Perhaps that swirling void is the data, the cartridge that it's all on, just with nothing in place. And then suddenly, bit by bit, writers, game creators, people at Game Freak started writing the code of the Pokemon world. Yeah, they did it in binary, but it expressed itself as text. And the Unown represent the point where the text goes from just the text that goes into the cartridge and enters the canon of Pokemon, actualizing itself as one of the Pokemon creatures. This works for the TV show as well, that the point where the scriptwriter's words meet the page before it becomes the Pokemon world that we see on the TV screen. For the creatures and people in the Pokemon world, they very much believe they're real, but the Unown, they are that barrier, holding the fabric of time and space together, like we see in the Darkrai movie when Dialga and Palkia are fighting. And what I love about that theory, what I love about that thought experiment is, if the people in the Pokemon world think they're real, and they just seem to live within a video game simulation, then what's more likely, that we are truly real, or that we are just one in a chain of creatures that think they're real, but actually live in a story? And if we do live in a story, I hope this is the one where you hit the like button. And subscribe if you're really enjoying this. And I got a bunch more Pokemon lore videos for you to check out. Okay, moving on. A little less existential, let's take a little look at Wobbuffet, one of my favorite Pokemon. I think Wobbuffet is fantastic. And you've probably heard this classic theory on Lockstin's channel, though it's hard to say who first came up with this because this is a really old school Pokemon theory. Right after the Unown in the Pokedex is the mysterious Pokemon Wobbuffet. And the Unown and Wobbuffet are two of only a handful of Pokemon in the first couple generations that aren't animals. In fact, it's very hard to determine quite what they are. These two Pokemon are next to each other, both psychic type, and Wobbuffet has a mysterious tail. The tail has the same black color of the Unown skin, and it also has two big white irises. Wobbuffet is a Pokemon that doesn't really like to be seen. It stays hidden in its cave in the dark, only really moving around at night. It's not a very brave Pokemon, but it does have incredible power, able to absorb and repel incredibly strong attacks. But here's the thing. That Pokemon was just another mysterious Psychic-type Pokemon. It wasn't until Gen 3 that we could start putting the puzzle pieces together with Wobbuffet's pre-evolution Wynaut. Only findable in the wild on the Mirage Island, a mysterious place that just sort of disappears from reality. Much like how the Unown in Hoenn can only be found in the Mirage Cave, Wynaut is the same as Wobbuffet, mysterious and psychic, and it doesn't like to socialize outside of its own group. It says that they sort of huddle together, squashing against each other to kind of harden their body as a form of training. They live in these big clusters, much like the Unown. And on top of that, when you look at their tails, their relationship to the Unown becomes a little bit more clear. Pokedex entries of Wobbuffet suggest that its tail hides a secret, and many people believe that the true Pokemon is the tail, that the body is just some kind of facsimile that is designed to protect and absorb attacks from these Pokemon that when they are on their own, they are quite weak. It's why they start their life as Pokemon, moving from Unown to more ordinary creatures of the Pokemon world, doing so in clusters for protection until they're strong enough to start venturing out into the world, but not with their buddies anymore. They are still incredibly nervous. But they won't be going back to being Unown, oh no, because by the time they've evolved from a Wynaut to a Wobbuffet, it is too late. They truly are a new species of Pokemon. And a little bit of linchpin evidence that brings all of that together is that the creature that the Unown is trying to imitate in creating the body of a Wynaut are human beings. People, to the best of their ability, that's what they're trying to create. Which is why the sexual dimorphism within the Wobbuffet species looks like this. They're trying to mimic what they see in people. Okay, let's talk about different languages in the world of Pokemon, and this is one of my favorites, and it's actually originally, as far as I can tell, by Ruin Maniac, the person editing this very video, and actually all of the Pokemon lore videos that we do. The Unown is not the only lost language in the Pokemon world. It's said that the writing system dates back at least 1,500 years, according to a Ruin Maniac, not the one who's editing this video, who's in the Tanboy Ruins area of the Sevi Islands, where, as I mentioned earlier, there is another writing system, the Braille Dots. The Braille Dots are on Island 1, but the puzzle that unlocks the final canyon ruins where you can catch Unown, well, that puzzle is much like a Regi puzzle as well. Regi puzzles can be found all across the world of Pokemon, of course in Hoenn and Sinnoh, but even in Unova, the Braille can be found. And we need to start talking about the ancient cultures across the Pokemon world. We know that the Sinjo ruins, where the Unown feature, are a few hundred years old, built by the joint cultures of the people of Johto and Sinnoh, or rather more likely ancient Hisui. This was probably the Celestica people, who built with similar architecture across the Hisui region hundreds of years ago. And that same architecture, the pillars, they can be seen in the Snow Point Temple right to the north of Hisui. Now, the people who locked away the Regis, and this is something that's going to have to come up in an ancient cultures lore video for the Pokemon world, or perhaps a video about the Regis, but I will say it was probably the ancient Celestica people, or the Draconids, all those people being one and the same. The Draconids are an ancient tribe from around 2,000 years ago from the Hoenn region, and after their home was destroyed in Meteor Falls, they became nomadic. We believe many of them settled in Pacifilog Town to the south of the Hoenn region, and we know this because the people of Pacifilog Town, if there was ever a town where the Lawkeeper's descendants could exist, it's here. The people of the town are nearby to the Braille Regi ruins of the underwater chambers of Hoenn. It's right next door to the Sky Pillar that was built by the Draconids. People of the town know about the Regis, they know about Rayquaza, they know about the Latis, they know about Mirage Islands. And a similar people of seafaring people could be found at the Seafolk Village in the Alola region. There's a lot of connections to ancient cultures all across the Pokemon world because this group of people became nomadic, traveled, and brought with them language. A language that, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago probably was that of the Braille Regis, but I believe that as they moved up through Johto, through Sinjo, and into Hisui, that language began to evolve. We know that the mystery stage of the Sinjo ruins was likely in part built by the Kimono Girls. It is a stage where an ancient dance allows the people there to commune with the god of Sinnoh. Arceus. The Kimono Girls use this exact same kind of worship for Ho-Oh and Lugia, and Ho-Oh has a big presence in the Ruins of Alph, as we see it depicted on one of the murals. So there's a connection to all of this. On top of that, the people of the Kimono Girls, they are quite literally the lore keepers of the region, and we see some Kimono Girls in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire standing outside the chamber of Groudon and Kyogre, connecting all of this together. Hoenn, Johto, Sinnoh, and presumably as well Kanto, and actually Kitakami, I'd imagine as well, as part of the same continent. They all share a lot of history and a lot of culture, and I can imagine a world in which the Unown writing system is the more modern version of the Braille writing system that starts as dots and evolves into eyes with symbols around it. There's actually a bunch of other stuff that this ties into, like how the Kimono Girls and their relationship to like Togepi and Celebi, but that is like a whole other video that I have already done on this channel. I'll have to watch that after this one. It kind of really expands on that lore in a way that you might not expect. So, going back to the Ruins of Alph then, and that comment about Ho-Oh, like, what is the deal with Ho-Oh exactly? Why is it in the Ruins of Alph? Well, we know that the Unown's power includes the ability to help Arceus to create one of the legendary trio of time and space. The Unown, it seems, taps into the mind of perhaps you, the player character, or Arceus itself to create what it wants to see. We see in the amazing Pokemon third movie, the Unown telepathically communicate with the young girl Molly to kind of project images of, well, legendary Pokemon. Illusions, but they become real. That's, of course, of Entei, another Pokemon the Unown might have experience creating, because we know, of course, thanks to the sages in Pokemon Crystal, that the Unown have a special connection to Suicune, and it's formed from a great crystal on its head. We don't know it's formed from the crystal on its head. I'm making that jump, because, yeah, they create things using crystal structures. And by accessing people's wants and dreams. Even in the Pokemon Journeys series, in the episode Star Night, Starflight, we see this replayed in the character of Tiara, a young girl who lost her Cleffa. The Unown tap into her mind, and from it create an eternal night from her desires, so that she might see her Cleffa in the night sky again. A powerful warping of reality based on the mind of a child. It seems possible that the Unown tapped into the mind of Ho-Oh or the people of Ecruteak to basically create the legendary beasts. That's one theory of its own. But the other part of that story is that the legendary beasts are the resurrections of deceased Pokemon in the towers of Johto. So perhaps this is what the Unown can do with the help and aid of a legendary Pokemon. Ho-Oh uses the Unown to help revive Pokemon that have long since been gone. This finally explains why Kabuto, Omanyte, and Aerodactyl appear on the walls in the rest of the Ruins of Alph. The idea is that, yeah, Kabuto, Omanyte, and Aerodactyl used to live in this area, and thanks to the Unown, Ho-Oh commanded these Pokemon to be kept alive. And what's funny and interesting is that in Kabuto's more modern Pokedex entries, like in the Crown Tundra, it said that Kabuto actually are pretty common in some places, though they are thought to have mostly gone extinct, suggesting the idea that there are pockets of this creature out there, and the Union Cave is connected to the ocean. The Union Cave, of course, being the place that is directly south and allows bits of the Ruins of Alph to become accessible. So if it connects to the ocean, perhaps there, at some point in history, the rare Kabuto and Omanyte and Aerodactyl were resurrected and kept alive, and then escaped into the open seas and spread out into the Pokemon world. Now, this next one is just something I was thinking about while scripting this video, because Gold and Silver do such a good job of like painting a picture using environmental storytelling. We should have a look at the other wildlife that you can find in the Ruins of Alph. Chiefly, there's a couple Pokemon that you can only really find there. Natu and Smeargle. I suppose Wooper's there too, but let's focus on these first two. So let's just take a look at Smeargle, for example. There's a wonderful video by Blue Boy Finn that suggests the reason Smeargle can be found in-game in that area is because Smeargle's a painter Pokemon, and the Unown symbols represent ancient cave paintings. But it's possible that in-world, Smeargle is the Pokemon that painted Kabuto and Ho-Oh and Omanyte and Aerodactyl onto the walls of the Ruins of Alph. Perhaps it's here that people use Smeargle's tail to try and communicate with the Unown. Additionally, Smeargle has an incredibly powerful move, Sketch, that can become any other move in the Pokemon world. Perhaps Smeargle learned to absorb this information, the information of all the possible expressions of Pokemon moves, by studying the Unown, Pokemon that are somehow foundational to the Pokemon world. It truly is a mastery of an art form. Then there's Natu and Xatu. Natu hops about like any other small bird Pokemon, but as it evolves into Xatu, it represents a Pokemon that again is a work of art, a totem. And this Pokemon is once again a psychic type just like the Unown, so perhaps they're telepathically connected, and it remains still. It has no interest in moving. It is scared of the different futures that could be created as a result of its actions. Given their connection to the fabric of reality, I do wonder if Xatu, having been raised and grown as a species mostly around the ruins of Alph, if these Pokemon are somehow like tuned in to the visions of the future that the Unown could possibly create, and paralyzed in fear, they do not move. Then of course, yeah, there is Wooper. And Wooper has little fins on it that look kind of like an antenna. And that ties into the next theory. This one was just, I just like exploring the wildlife. We should talk about the radio waves, because yeah, in the Ruins of Alph, there are strange radio signals that seem to sound like, well, the noise the Azure flute makes to summon Arceus, right? I've said that already in this video. But there is something here about the Unown and radio waves and just the supernatural in general. See, in both Kanto and Johto in the time of Generation 2, there are radio towers, one in the far east and one in the far west. The one in Goldenrod is not far from the Ruins of Alph, and in the Japanese version, the communications center that I mentioned earlier in the video, well, that seems to have caused more Unown to start appearing at the Ruins of Alph, likely as a result of the mobile signals that it's activating. The Unown travel on this kind of wavelength, the wavelengths of communication. But what's more interesting is the towers themselves. See, both the Goldenrod Tower and the Lavender Town radio tower? Well, we know what the Lavender Town Tower used to be, an ancient grave site where phenomena that hasn't been seen at all anywhere else in the franchise have taken form. Ghost Pokemon, like actual spirit Pokemon as opposed to just the ghost type, and healing circles halfway up. We don't see this kind of outpouring of infinity energy, this health energy, this life force of Pokemon that could just heal a team anywhere in the Pokemon world, and yet somehow it was put here by a Hex Maniac or a channeler. Meanwhile, over in Johto, the radio director says that the tower, where it used to stand, there was an old creaky building, and there he found one of the following items: a silver wing, a rainbow wing, or a clear bell. So clearly this tower used to be the place to worship some sacred Pokemon, Ho-Oh or Lugia, or perhaps even the legendary beast in more recent history. But since then, these radio towers have been built over, and the Pokegear is owned by Silphco, the same company that owns these towers. And we know that Silphco are interested in the supernatural of the Pokemon world. Just take a look at the Silphscope. So it seems likely here that the Silphco organization created these radio towers, knowing exactly where the towers were being built and what they were being built over. Perhaps they're trying to access something. Perhaps they're trying to access the dialogue of the force of creation, the Unown. And once you have that context, by the way, it changes the Team Rocket story in Generation 2. Because Team Rocket looked to take over the radio tower to bring back their boss, Giovanni. But we know they have an interest in radio waves because they use them by the Lake of Rage to force evolve Magikarp into Gyarados. The game director recognizes the power that Team Rocket hold, and he does not worry about the coming back of Giovanni. What he worries about is the Pokemon of the region if Team Rocket have access to the tower. So I think this man knows exactly the power that's in Team Rocket's hands, even if they don't. And just to connect the world of the supernatural here to radio waves once again, just look to Duskanoir's Pokedex entry, which says, the antenna on its head captures radio waves from the world of spirits that command it to take people there. Spooky. Now, this is just something I've noticed, like, as recording, so, like, hear me out here, follow me along here. Wherever the Unown ruins appear, Solaceon Town, the Ruins of Alph, we notice that, like, in Solaceon Town, there's a daycare center there. In fact, it's the main feature of the town other than the ruins. And sure enough, Goldenrod is only a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Ruins of Alph. This idea of new life and the Unown and eggs ties together again when you look to the Sinjo Ruins event and the creation of an egg. And now I'm beginning to wonder if the Unown represent the data of the Pokemon world, the code of the Pokemon world, whether it's a video game or not. Lawkeeper Toby doesn't believe that the Pokemon world is a video game. Okay, regardless of what the Unown specifically represent, if they're the code that makes things up, perhaps the statement that the Daycare couple say about how they don't know how an egg got there is really true, because the eggs, they appear as a result of the Unown observing Pokemon that are in love, not just bored, they're in love, and it observes these Pokemon that are compatible and decides to literally write into existence the eggs. It's not just the Sinjo Ruin event, and that's what makes the Solaceon Ruins, that's what makes the Goldenrod Daycare location like good places to have Pokemon daycares. Because while Unown live in the alternate dimension that wraps around the entire Pokemon world, the Unown are concentrated in these areas as quite literally creators of life. Okay, just another quick one, and this one's more for you to answer in the comments, because there's kind of a thread here that I've always thought about this. This has been in my notes since the very beginning of my time studying Pokemon theories over 10 years ago, and I've never quite been able to put it together. There is another hieroglyph Pokemon that I think might be related to the Unown. Sigilyph. Just look at Sigilyph. Look at the top of its head. Much like Wobbuffet, you could believe that that's an Unown up there. And on top of that, it's one of those Pokemon where the biology of this creature doesn't really mimic organic creatures. Or maybe it does, but it mimics it poorly, like Wobbuffet. It's a psychic Pokemon, and it's found around ancient ruins. And when you look to its design, it looks very similar. And when I put it on the Tree of Evolution, this is the Pokemon I thought it was the most likely related to, Johto. It's a Pokemon that's body is designed like a work of art. It's much the same. I wonder if it's possible that Unown on one side of the Pokemon world, having a game of sort of whispers communicated from across the Pokemon world, the Unown in Johto observing this Pokemon, Johto. Perhaps the Unown of Unova wanted to materialize themselves much like those that become Wobbuffet and Wynut had, and turn themselves into this ancient Pokemon Sigilyph. But there's just never quite been enough evidence there. So maybe you can finish this theory in the comments or in a video of your own. My friend the Alchemist thinks there's another Pokemon that falls into this category of the Unown trying to actualize itself as other Pokemon, and that is Mimikyu. This is a fun idea. The idea that the Unown saw how popular Pikachu was becoming in modern day in the Pokemon world, and so started disguising itself under a piece of cloth. A piece of cloth that looks like Pikachu, but the problem is this cloth, it wasn't as good as a full body in the way that Wobbuffet or maybe Sigilyph are. So instead its bodies just started to disintegrate and it became a ghost. And now, the people that look under that cloth, well, they very often don't live to tell the tale because they can't describe what they're seeing truly. It's the sort of falling apart of the divine form of the Unown as it disintegrates and turns into the ghost type. And actually, no, I'm sorry, there is one more. There is one more Pokemon. And then I'm going to tell a story, and then I've got some more theories for you. So, okay, there is one more Pokemon here that does look a lot like the Unown. In fact, in the time of Generation 1, it was the only Pokemon that looked like the Unown. Magnemite. Potentially Unown that are materializing out in space. Because yes, it's a giant floating eyeball, and I say space because we see ancient depictions of Magnemite in the TCG, at least. In some TCG promotional art, we see it existing in the ancient world around the Ruins of Alph. But on top of that, we know it's an alien. It existed at least 3,000 years ago in the War of AZ, so it's not a modern Pokemon, and Magnezone is very clearly based off of a UFO. On top of that, Sandy Shocks lived in the ancient past of an alternate timeline, and we think it's probably related, or at least I do, to the Beldum line, another steel-type Pokemon 3-stage evolutionary line that starts as a single eyeball and evolves as more of its species come together, and it represents a flying saucer, does Matang, and they both have connections to electromagnetism, and they're found in the same kinds of places that have connections to space. I've been through this a lot on the channel before. Is it possible that Magnemite is the Unown, but instead of materializing itself as a Pokemon here on the Pokemon world, it did it out in space, and in doing so gave itself a steel shell to protect itself against the elements of space and radiation, and uses electromagnetism to find other Pokemon worlds? And this idea of the Unown being out there in the Pokemon universe exploring space brings a lot of credence to the idea of space Pokemon, and in particular, the Ultra Beasts. When the Ultra Beasts were first revealed, people often thought that the Unown might actually be some kind of Ultra Beast. They're Pokemon-like species, of course, but they seem to come from another dimension. That's something that's depicted constantly in the animated series. And of course, the Ultra Beasts are from some kind of alternate or parallel reality, where Pokemon have evolved, some exactly the same as in our world, we see this in the Ultra Space Wilds, and others in these different new shapes, the Ultra Beasts. This is something I'll have to cover in more detail in a full Ultra Beast video, which I cannot wait to make that. But anyway, the Ultra Beasts are super interesting, and there's one in particular that hasn't had its lore explored much, but appeared in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, Stack Attacker. Just looking at it, you could sort of see where I'm going with this. A large blocky stone-like structure, like an ancient ruin, made up of stones that have on them eyes. What does this remind us of? According to its Pokedex entry, each one appears to be made up of many life forms stacked on top of one another. It glows with a psychic-like energy. Its eyes move independently. Even when it moves its arms, they seem to separate as if bound by a psychic energy. Is this a cluster of Unown that have even found their way into Ultra Space? I leave that with you to decide. So I do have more theories for you, more theories that the community has come up with. We're getting close to the end now, but I really want to share with you this image. This is one of my favorite bits of fan art, and this is not a theory. This is just my experience of the Unown when the first time I was playing Pokemon. I told this story on stream or in a video once, and I guess Adorablush created this bit of artwork to represent the story, and it's a pretty quick one. It's that I couldn't work out what the Unown meant then, much as I can't work it out now. But at the time, I was determined that there actually was an answer somewhere in the game, and I thought perhaps it had something to do with Celebi. I accessed every Unown cavern through the shrines in the Ruins of Alph and caught every Unown form, and with that decided that I would now go to where I thought Celebi would be, the Ilex Forest, where there is a small shrine, and walking around the shrine for maybe hours, just searching the forest. Every tile, I found something. A golden Caterpie, as you can see right here in the picture. This was my first shiny, outside of the Red Gyarados, of course. This was my first shiny Pokemon, this Caterpie. And I caught it, and I knew I was onto something, and I evolved it, and I wrote into Pokemon World magazine, which was a magazine that we had here where you could ask questions directly to Game Freak. At least I thought. I'm not sure that's how it works. And I took out my postcard that I got from the Southern Islands Pokemon card set, and I wrote on it, "Dear Pokemon Company, I figured out the next step in the Unown puzzle. I've caught all the Unown forms, unlocked the chambers, and I found the golden Caterpie. Where do I go next for Celebi?" I never got an answer, but that just meant that I kept digging, and that led me to here, where I ended up making videos like this. It might be the reason that I'm interested in Pokemon lore like I am. Just imagining that there is some secret, some answer out there. And this bit of art captures that perfectly, so thank you to Adorablush for creating it. And now let's get back to some theories. Okay, 3 quickfire silly ones and then a proper one. So, quickfire silly one number 1. The idea is that in Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, you can get the Azure Flute in your game if you've got completed save data of Legends Arceus on your console. The idea is that because this is a communication between 2 games, and it's specifically to do with the Azure Flute, it's the Unown, acting as the code between the 2 worlds that tell the games to basically produce and materialize the Azure Flute in that world. It's a silly one, but I kind of like it. The next one is one I took from watching a live stream by a wonderful YouTuber you should check out called Krillix, who does really long deep dives into the world of Pokemon, and it was actually a suggestion by one of his audience members. Thank you, Just JC. And the idea here is an explanation behind Shiny Unown. Why are they blue instead of black? Where the idea is they represent a hyperlink. That's it. I told you it was, look, we're getting silly. There's one more proper one coming, but first, a final quick silly one. And again, tying into this idea of the Unown as code, why are there Rhydon statues in the Ruins of Alph? I mean, actual Rhydon statues, not just Pokemon representing Rhydon like we see in the early Pokemon games. In Heart Gold Soul Silver, we see both in the Ruins of Alph and the Sinjo ruins, these are statues of Rhydon. Why Rhydon? Well, if the Pokemon world really is, within the canon of Pokemon, a fake reality created by the Unown, then the Unown are not only connected to Arceus, but they are also worshipping the other first Pokemon. The first Pokemon that they coded in. Rhydon, their first creation. That one I like. I think that one's really fun. And now we've got the final serious theory, which is the meaning of the Unown. What are they trying to say? The Unown appear all over the place in Pokemon canon, but the most common thing that we see the Unown saying are words to these effects. All lives touch other lives to create something new and alive. I think it represents relationships. I think it represents influence. I think it represents creativity. People coming together. When lives touch one another, yeah, you can take it in the very literal sense and say, and they create something new that is alive. So it's talking about What's the word I'm looking for? I got very hung up thinking about the word, and the word isn't the word you think it is. The word reproduction. People coming together to create the next generation. Like, it could be talking about that in a literal sense, but I don't think it is. And maybe it's partly talking about that, but I think it's also taken metaphorically. It's talking about creation. People coming together to create anything different that is alive. Art. Pokemon theories, perhaps. To create some sense of meaning. I hope you feel the same kind of unity I feel when I make these videos, that this is something you're interested in as a lore keeper of the Pokemon world. If you've got this far, then yeah, you must be interested in it. And I hope you create something new and alive. And I hope you find something interesting in the Pokedoku puzzle. Maybe you'll find some meaning there, link in the description. And if you want to find out just a little bit more about the cultures of Johto and the Unown and how they all kind of fit into this bigger, wider puzzle, then there is another theory you should check out, which is... It's been amazing to see so many of you become members and Patreons to support the work I do here. Before long, it won't just be the Unown who are, well, known. And it's all thanks to you.